I gave you a folder with lots of good stuff in it. I wanted to go over that quickly, but before we do that, I want to kind of walk around the room and have people introduce each other, let you know who you are, so that you can relate to each other a little bit. Can you start?
I'm Lena Hadjihonoglou, and I teach humanities in Center Campus.
Hi, I'm Julie Lofquist. I teach here at South, IT.
Hi, I'm Angela Zorzecki. I'm coordinator for the CT department.
My name is Gail Turry, and I'm the manager of career and technical education at Professional College.
Michael Warwick. I'm an adjunct in the English department for a little over a decade now, mostly down at South.
I'm Sharon Tremblay, coordinator in Arts and Sciences, South and Center Campus.
I'm Marcy Cowling, and I teach in the engineering technology adjunct, and I teach in the introduction to sustainability. Just one class.
Great. I'm Bill Drummond. I work for the CTL, and I'm here most every day from 7 o'clock in the morning till about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Once in a while I'm at Center Campus, but not often. I'm kind of here. Before we go on, before we even look in here, I wanted to kind of get anybody's impression or idea of why is copyright important? What is the issue? Why are we here? Anybody?
Because you don't want to steal other people's work.
Okay.
It's their time and effort, and it's just appropriate to give them acknowledgement for that.
Correct. I like that.
We're doing,
Honest.
I teach web programming, and I tell my students, and this is true, everything on the internet is copyrighted, even if it doesn't have a copyright symbol, and you can't just grab it and take it. But I think with the technology, I think especially the younger generation, but it's not just the younger generation, people see the stuff out there, and I don't even think they realize that they're taking it. I have a 17-year-old son, and he never pays for music, never, and none of his friends do. And I've tried to explain to him that hurts the artist. It hurts, I think that it's not only a generational thing, but I think people are not aware of it. It's not even that they're trying to steal; they just don't even think that. It's like, wow, I can just cut and paste.
And the music industry is one of the most vocal and active in trying to stem that tide and change that attitude, but really, really good. Anyone else? Yes.
Yeah, I'm interested because I teach online, and so I want to make sure that when I use a lot of online resources in my class, and I don't want to encourage my students to not behave appropriately by what I do.
Right.
And I want to make mistakes. Also, I've written things myself that I post online. That are my little booklets on regulations, and I'd like that to be kept as mine.
Right. You have some self-interest there too.
Mm-hmm.
We create stuff, and we want to actually have some ownership of that as well. So there are a lot of really important reasons to do this and to know about this, especially in this world and the way technology is expanding like a mushroom cloud. We really need to understand where this all fits. Now, the United States is different from other countries on this as well as many other things. So we're going to talk about mostly what happens in the United States. And I'll get into some of that in a minute. First, I want to look at your folder because there's some interesting and important things in this folder that I wanted you to look at. The first thing is this stapled typed document. These are all of the Macomb Community College policies concerning copyright and fair use that I could find on the intranet. They're all available to you on the intranet. You can go through and find them, but I made a copy here so that you don't have to go searching. And the very last page is a form that you can fill out for clearing copyright, to try to clear copyright for something that you might want to use. So it's a useful form. These, I know, are in the process of revision. There's a newer policy that's already been passed through the lawyers and through the board, and it's not yet been promulgated. Bruce Bett and I from the library worked on the first draft and sent it through. It's mostly concerning fair use as opposed to copyright. And it's going to be very beneficial for faculty and students. It's more liberal in terms of what's going to be allowed. It's a liberal interpretation of the law. But very important documents that you should be familiar with. Part of the law means that we have to give workshops like this and make this information available to faculty, staff, and students. So very important stuff there. This is a nice little tool for you to use. If you want to know whether you can use this article or image or quote or something, follow this little example, this little yes or no path, and it'll help you know whether or not you should actually use something. So it's a neat little tool. Highly recommend it. This is done by the University of Minnesota under the Creative Commons license. It's a nice little tool for you. I have next a one-page document that is actually got a lot of links that don't work because it's a printed page. So I'll make this available to you when actually it's on our website. But the links are written underneath, so you can actually type in the URL. These are some really helpful things about copyright and fair use. Some of the best stuff about that. Really good for you. Next is a copy, printed copy in color of the presentation that we're doing today. It's not really long, not a whole lot of slides, but I hope you find this useful. And please, if there's anything here that you have questions about or see that needs to be changed, let me know. I'll be doing this again. On the next side is really just a pad of paper and what I need from you at the end, which is the evaluation. We actually really use these, so you know how much those are important, so I'm not going to push that too much. Okay. Before we begin going through this, any questions, any issues, any ting?
I don't know what we're going to go through, but my main concern is that, and you know, what I heard from you saying that everything, even if it doesn't say so, is copyrighted. Just because I teach mythology, sometimes I download from the internet pictures which supplement the stories I'm teaching. Of paintings or art, whatever, but you know, sometimes I have seen that this is a copyrighted material, but if it doesn't say that it's a copyrighted, it's still copyrighted?
It depends on where you get it from.
Yeah, well, you know.
It doesn't depend.
Oh, it doesn't?
Everything, the actual quote is something to the effect of, once it is in a fixed form, it is copyrighted.
Everything on the web is copyrighted. That's what I tell my
Yes,
students.
everything on the web. Everything in any fixed form is copyrighted by definition, and that's an international convention, the Berne Convention of 1989 or something like that. That is for sure. You do not have to register something. This C doesn't have to be there, or any other registration does not have to appear for it to be copyrighted. It's copyrighted in the act of posting it somewhere or putting it into any fixed form. So printing something, drawing something on a piece of paper, that's copyrighted automatically.
What I meant though was like if she's getting it from a website that is free, it is given to you, there's like a license that you can use. That's what I meant.
Great.
So there are certain areas that you can get stuff for use.
There's
But it
tons.
depends on where you are. You can't just grab.
Exactly.
But in other words, somebody has gone places and has put on the web pictures from his, her trip. Are these copyrighted?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Everything's copyrighted, but the copyrighted does not mean you can't use it.
Oh,
And that's where we're going to talk about fair use and other use. And types of copyright as well. There are different versions or flavors of copyright that allow for free use.
are you going to explain to us what fair use means?
I'm going to talk about it a little
Great.
bit, yes.
Okay.
Fair use is a very specific thing for academics, and it's really important for you to understand. However, and as I let you know, none of this is 100%. It's all in flux. It's all in the court still. It's still being defined. Yes, sir?
Just to add on something about the internet, for the most part, a lot of sites, they'll let you link to things without really counting, because it creates traffic. You're not actually copying, you're just pointing out where it is. So you can sometimes...
Giving them credit
Yeah.
for it.
So by the fact that you're basically directing somebody to their website, they're actually getting traffic, they're actually getting a benefit out of you doing that. So most places will let you do that for free. Some places will actually require you that if you link to it, put a short little disclaimer that says that you're not affiliated. Because I run a soccer blog for the high schools, and most of the league websites, they're perfectly happy to let me just link to them. They don't. I don't even have to ask. There's nothing. I just put a link. It was fine. But the Catholic League is different. They want a non-affiliation because they run through the archdiocese. Try actually have a full non-affiliation blurb on the website that says we're not actually affiliated with them, but by the way, here's the link if you want the the scores from their games. So there are some ways around. Instead of downloading, sometimes you can go the other way and just link to it.
Are you giving credit to the pictures that you're
Well,
taking?
see, for me, just the thing is that I don't put them online for them to link to, because, I create PowerPoints.
Right, but
Right,
you're
but you can put a
taking
link in a
somebody's
PowerPoint.
picture.
Yeah, so far,
But you're not crediting it.
Well, see, so far, if there is something that I see it's copyrighted, I try to stay away from it. But pictures which are kind of loose out there, I didn't even know that I had to give credit. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why I'm here.
Actually, that may be okay even without giving credit.
Right, because of the fair use.
Because of fair use.
Yes,
Yeah.
which we'll get to.
And
Yeah.
it's a very complicated thing, and it's also, again, something that's in flux. So, in any case, let's go to the next page, because we will talk about some of the things we're going to talk about. We are going to develop working definitions of copyright and fair use. Two different things related. Test classroom materials for compliance, on-ground, hybrid, online. They're different. They have different rules, and they have different laws attached to them. Kind of keep that in your mind, because as they are done in the classroom does not necessarily mean the same is okay online, or part online, part not online. They're different. We're going to discuss some unresolved issues, because there are many of them. Things are not resolved. There are things right now in the Supreme Court. I have a funny little article here that I printed out yesterday from the Chronicle of Higher Education, which was a link from the law school blog about a guy who is very entrepreneurial student, now no longer a student, who didn't like how much they were paying for textbooks, and was a dual citizen of the United States and Thailand. And he had many family members in Thailand who were able to purchase used books, exactly the same book that they were using in their campuses, and he could get them for less than 1/10 of the price and sell them to students. And because they were used, the publisher has already made their money on them. And is a used book sale illegal? if it's, well, it's right now in front of the Supreme Court. Very interesting case, and there are many like this that are going on. It's a real soup. Okay, so, and then finally we're going to explore some resources, some of those that we've given you. And I'd like you to kind of think about it as we go through, how does this translate into what's happening to me in my classes, in my work, at home? What questions does this bring up, and how am I going to react to this? Because it really means something to you. Next. First, before we go any farther, I gotta tell you, I'm not a lawyer. I am not an expert in this field. I am not speaking for Macomb Community College. I work at the CTL. So you gotta take with anything I say with a large grain of salt. I am not a full-blown expert in this subject at all. Also, there are so many unresolved issues and very complex issues, even if I were a lawyer and an expert and speaking for Macomb. Nothing I could tell you would be resolved anyway, because this is all in flux. And it's going to continue to change. It's going to be for the foreseeable future, this is a mess. So you have to be careful, but also you have some leeway because of that. Nothing has been resolved yet. Things are still kind of open. But there are some court cases that are going through, and there have been some laws passed. And most importantly for you, because you're here, there are policies that we do have to follow. So put those over. The Macomb policies are important. Okay, now, I had somewhere, hold on a second, please. Let me make sure I'm not forgetting anything.
I think I've talked to you on a bit. When I call, I'm always calling for help. Have I talked to you?
I don't know, but I may have seen you in the office though, because I'm
Yeah.
in the engineering and tech office.
Oh, okay.
Right at the front door, so.
Oh, okay, that might be it. People from IT are probably, well, that's that lady that called.
See, I have my notes pages that I have to make sure I'm not missing something. Okay, in this workshop you will. Caveats. Okay. Next, we're going to try to define copyright. Well, there's a link to a wiki page definition of copyright. But basically, it's a compound word. Copy, right. The right to make a copy. So who has the right to make a copy of something? That's really what we're talking about, is making a copy of things. Now, the U.S. is, as I kind of intimated earlier, the U.S. is not completely compliant with the rest of the world. The rest of the world is much more open to this in terms of use. In the U.S., it's very, very different. Kicking and screaming, the U.S. finally signed the Berne Convention in 1989, which was originally promulgated in the 1800s. But they signed it in 1989. That's the International Convention for Copyright. And since that date, this is when anything that has a final form is automatically copyrighted. Before that date in the US, you had to have a registered copyright. You had to go to the Copyright Office. send something to them with some money and have them actually put their stamp on it and register it as a copyright. You no longer have to do that, and you haven't had to do that since 1989. But, and there's a caveat because it's the US, if you want to enforce your copyright for something, register it. Because the government is not going to help you out in any way unless you have registered the copyright. Now, the copyright may be there because of the Berne Convention, but the U.S. legal system is not going to go into your favor unless you register with them. So if you really want something copyrighted,
How do you do that?
you have to write to the U.S. Copyright Office in Washington and send them artifact. There's a form, and you have to pay them money, and then it becomes a registered thing, and then you're okay. But it's a long process. It doesn't happen overnight, and it's not free. But if you want something copyrighted, that's what you have to do.
And this is the only place where, I mean, the only way that you could put that C under your work or whatever?
Well, you can put it wherever you want, but the only way it's enforceable is if you do it through the government.
I see. Okay. So the government can go after the people if
Right.
it's proven that.
If you want to enforce copyright, if you have a complaint, you need to have whatever the thing is registered through the U.S. Copyright Office.
But if you publish an article on the web or whatever, and you want to put a C there, just to tell people they can use it, but they have to acknowledge it, whatever, you can do that, right?
You can do that, and you can do other things because there are alternatives to the U.S. copyright, especially if you have caveats such as, I would like you to make sure you acknowledge me if you use this. And these are, through the most common and well-developed, is Creative Commons. In the Creative Commons, there are several flavors of copyright within the Creative Commons. One of them is you can do whatever you want, you don't have to say anything, and you can change it, and that's fine. Wide open. All the way down to you have to acknowledge me, or you can't change anything, or you have to do other things. There are different restrictions. There are like 5 levels within the Creative Commons copyright milieu. And you can put there, you'll see this often on web pages and other things, Creative Commons license. And it's very, very common.
I may have seen it and don't know what it is.
Right, and you'll see it now and you'll go, oh, what? It's very,
Most of the
very...
pages somewhere on the front page, they have, a lot of times they put at the bottom all the little copyright notices and use and all these kinds of things.
Right, just, you gotta look and see all that stuff is there, it's just, you gotta look.
Well, see, it's good that we have this
Yeah.
because it creates awareness, I didn't have before.
Now the precursor, and it still exists, mostly for software, but other things as well, as the new GPL license. And that was actually before there was a Creative Commons license, and it kind of morphed into the Creative Commons license. But that still exists, the new GPL, and GPL stands for General Public License. And actually, and another one is called Copyleft. Kind of cute. So I will read to you my notes. In 1989, the U.S. enacted the Berne Convention Implementation Act, amending the 1976 Copyright Act to conform to most of the provisions of the Berne Convention. As a result, the use of copyright notices has become optional to claim copyright because the Berne Convention makes copyright automatic as soon as something is in a fixed form. Several exclusive rights typically attach to the holder of a copyright. 1, to produce copies of or reproductions of the work and to sell those copies including electronic copies. 2, to import or export the work. So you can import it into countries, you can export it to other countries. 3, this is kind of tricky, to create derivative works. So that's if you write an article and you want to rewrite it a little bit, change it a little bit, maybe cut it down and make another issue a different one, that's a derivative work. Another person could not take your work if you have copyrighted it and do that with it. A derivative work is still copyrighted. So they cannot derive something from your work without somehow getting your permission or somehow getting the copyright to do that. They can pay you to do that, they can just get your permission to do that, you can have a different kind of copyright, but you cannot derive something without copyright.
Does this include, let's say you write an article and you want to use a few words in the original language if it's not English, or even if it's in English. You have a scholarly article and you say this scholar says this, and you quote half a line or something. Does this need copyright? Because I know that in publication, if it's a book or something, they need to have permission if it's above every number of words. But is it the same online?
It's the same online, but it's also not, there isn't above a certain, it's a not fixed thing. And it depends. And it's part of copyright's fuzziness is you don't know. So you have to be careful. You can quote somebody, quote a work, but if you're quoting too much, if you're doing full pages, if you're making money on it, there's a difference between fair use, is what you're talking about, and copyright infringement.
Yeah, but see, the point is that in my doctoral dissertation, for instance, you know, I had to use a lot of ancient writers to prove the point I was making in my text. And although I was saying it in English, in a parenthesis I put the Greek text there to show to the person who knows Greek the gravity of the argument or whatever. But the point is, to what extent, I mean, I'm quoting from an ancient text from the Oxford edition, put a few words there.
If it's ancient text that you're quoting,
yeah,
don't worry about
I
it.
don't think anyone's going to come after you.
Yes, sir.
No, but I mean, the Oxford University Press could come.
Well, usually that's probably going to fall under public domain, which means unless there's something particular to their translation or the way they put the text out there, then it's completely fine for anybody.
Wait, did you
That's
cite
why
it?
Jack
You
is
cited it.
Oh,
right?
you see,
You know,
yeah.
The other thing
But you
is,
know, at that point, you know,
right,
it was a
but
long time
again,
ago.
because the words are all considered, if it's something where the words are all the same, and it's, you know, basically pre-1900, then it's in public domain, which means anybody can use it, it doesn't matter.
And I think when we
even
get
if
to
you take
fair
your word for
use,
word,
it'll
you
make
don't
Yeah,
more
but I
sense
mean,
to
the
you, right?
point
Fair
is-
use,
because
fair use
it-
will help her.
The text is before 1930, whatever, or 1900.
But-
But the point is that the Oxford edition,
But if they're...
which is the publication
Right.
that has the text,
But that's still,
might be
it's
very
still
recent.
considered, but as long as there's nothing changing in the text in terms of their editing, then it doesn't matter. Because it's considered fair use. That's why you can see so many of the older books like Dracula, or although Stoker screwed up and never copywrote it outside of England. But something like that, you can, you know, or Christmas Carol we got coming up this time. Everybody puts out their little $2 edition because they don't have to pay anybody for the text.
Right.
It's all the same. The most they have to pay one person to go through and edit it a little bit.
And I think
But
when
they
we
don't
get to
act
fair
like the
use,
actual
it'll make
copyright
more sense.
doesn't
Yeah,
count.
fair use.
We'll get to that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other
yeah.
thing is that a lot of times when you do get an article, like a scholarly article, a lot of times that stuff isn't even the person who writes it may not be the one that holds the copyright. A lot of things, if it's done as on a freelance nature, the magazine actually owns the copyright, which usually legally they don't enforce.
Right, and then this is what I mean.
Fair use.
It is a fuzzy thing, and it's really, it's going to come up to your best judgment. The more you know about it, the better your judgment will be, but you're never going to be 100% correct, and you're never going to feel 100% secure. And that's just the way it is. But I'm going to continue here quick, because there are 6 of these points that I'm going to try to talk about. The first one was to produce copies or reproductions. The second was import-export. The third is create derivative works. The fourth is to perform or display the work publicly. So even performances are copyrighted. To sell or assign the rights to others. So if you're working for hire for somebody, then the publication that you're working for owns the copyright because you've sold that by your work. Or you can sell it to others and give them the license. And then the last one is to transmit or display by radio or video the work. So you can actually stop somebody from displaying your work on a video. If you have a picture that you made and it's on the wall and a TV station comes in and they're filming something and they happen to capture your picture, you can stop them or you can ask them to compensate you for the use of that. And there's actually cases like that that have gone on. I have here a fairly lengthy but kind of fun, and there's a link to it in your documentation. This is a comic book about copyright and fair use, put out by Duke University, and it's really, really good. But some of it talks about in here where there's a case where Steven Spielberg was filming something, and in the background there was a TV on, and on the TV was a picture of Bart Simpson, and because of that, they had to cut that scene out of the movie because the owners of the copyright of Bart Simpson said, no, you can't put that on your movie. So it is really a complicated thing depending on how. So a TV show getting recorded over here can be copyrighted. So anyway, this is kind of fun and highly recommended. It's actually a really, really thorough investigation of copyright by Duke University.
Did you say it's on our website?
No, I put a link to it in the documentation that you have.
Okay.
It's actually in the list of resources there, and I'll talk about that later, but kind of cool, kind of fun. And you can come here and read it anytime you want. I'll have it on my desk there. Okay. Now again, Creative Commons is the most common alternative. New GPL, mostly for software. That's where it started.
What it stands for? General. The GPL stands for General what?
General Public License. And copyleft is a completely wide open form of Creative Commons and GPL. And just free and open, you can do whatever you want with it. So if you wanted to mention, if you wanted to make something available to people, if you're going to apply a copyright to something, and you want to say that it's open, you can say copyleft copyright. And that means it's completely wide open. Anybody can copy anything that they want and do whatever they want with it. It's like the most open of the forms. Okay. Now the tricky part. Copyright wasn't tricky enough. Fair use is a real morass. And it's not, well, how do you define fair? What's fair to you and fair to me may be very different. And in a legal sense, very difficult to define fair use. But that's what the law requires you to do. Especially in an online course, but even in a face-to-face course, you can use things without even asking anybody because you are educators at a accredited nonprofit organization, educational institution. Because of that, you can use things that other people can't do. Legally, you can do that by claiming fair use. Fair use, according to the law, is a limitation and exception to the exclusive right guaranteed by copyright law to the author of the creative work. That's what Wikipedia says. And it means that you can break the law. The law doesn't apply to you in certain cases. And one of those cases is called fair use. You can use this fairly in an educational situation under certain circumstances. There's a 4-factor balancing test that you, as an educator, have to perform. Those 4 factors are: 1, whether such use is of a commercial nature or for nonprofit educational purposes. Most important one. 2, what is the nature of the copyrighted work? Is it something that makes this very important for you to use or not important for you to use? It's the nature of the work that you have to consider. 3, the amount and sustainability of the portion used in relation to the copyrighted work as a whole. So for instance, if it's a 1-page document and you want to use that, are you just using one little bit? Or are you using the whole thing? Now, if it's a full-length movie and you're using 2 minutes, it's really a proportional thing. How much of this thing are you using? And 3, the effect of the use upon the potential market or value of the copyrighted work. So if you are going to use this, will this have any effect, and what effect will it have on the commercial value of the thing that you're using? You have to consider those 4 factors when you're, yes?
But I'm sorry to interrupt you, but your point too about the nature of the work,
Yes.
also one of the things that what my research on it has told me about the nature of the work, and I tell my students, it also has to be used, the nature in which you use it as the person borrowing it, it has to be used in a factual, contextual manner. You can't use it in a totally creative way that would cause anyone to misinterpret what the person meant by it. You have to be factual with it and not creative with it. Also what the nature of the work means.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I wasn't aware of that quirk in it.
Mm-hmm.
I know that it's also about how you present it. And presenting it as somebody else's copyright is important.
Yes.
And it has to be part of what you're actually doing in the class or in the program or whatever. It has to be an integral part of what you're trying to accomplish. You can't say, and now for a break, let's watch a movie.
Yeah.
It has to be part of what you're trying to do. But the nature of the work also is as you said, those things are important. Those are the 4-factor tests to help you decide if what you're doing is fair use. Now it's kind of hard to determine that every time. Most cases that you're going to use something, it's assumed that it's fair use. You're using it in your class. Now, there's an issue with how you're doing that on ground and online. And there are different rules. We'll talk about that in a second. Part of those are because of the DMCA, which is the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. And that's part of a larger thing that we'll talk about in just a second here, the next one. But this one, first of all, says that in most cases, you cannot circumvent technology that was used to retain copyright or to prevent copying. Some DVDs, for instance, have a little software thing in there that make it so that you can't make a copy of it easily. Some audio CDs also have an anti-copy software in them. Also, some videos are streamed over the internet so that you're not actually making a copy. It comes into your computer, goes out of your computer, and you don't have a copy. Those are, it's specifically, if it's being used that way, to prevent copying from happening. If you are circumventing that, you may be in violation of the Digital Millennial Copyright Act. However, because of fair use, in some cases, if you have a real strong case, you have to kind of consider, if you have to do this, you really need a strong case. If you have to break this law for fair use, you better have a very strong 4-factor balancing test completed. But you can, if you have a very strong case, you can circumvent this. You can break this law if you have a real good reason for doing so. The library does it routinely. I have done it many times.
I had an issue. It didn't become an issue for me because the library people were so wonderful cooperating. But you know, a few years ago, I had the college buy certain videos for my use in the class, and we purchased them, you know, legally and everything. But then when I wanted to put them online for my students to be able to watch them, they digitized them here, but then they got the law thing and they said, no, 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 we cannot use them. We have to pay extra for streaming line for rights. And I don't understand this law because we bought it.
You didn't buy that. This
Right.
is the important thing.
You bought-
You bought that form.
You didn't buy a.
You didn't buy the other
electronic
form. And if you remember when we talked about earlier, one of the 6 things is to transmit or display by radio or video.
And
When
isn't
they-
it like you said about the license, about the whatever we're using to record? You have 20 licenses, you don't have a site license. So we can only legally use 20.
Well, that's part of it, yes,
Yeah.
but it's if you're using it for your class, and it's an online class, and you're using it for your class, and it's an on-ground class, the thing that you're using on the on-ground class is a physical disc or a tape or something. In order to do that online, you have to change the format, and you cannot change the format legally without
Well,
the copyright.
Yeah, well, see, eventually the library bought the
They bought the
copyright,
streaming
the
rights.
streaming rights, and now I use the streaming rights even for my on-campus class because it's so much easier to.
Yes, yes. And now, by the way, little plug for the library, they recently have purchased thousands of videos that you all now have access to through the Films on Demand website. And I highly recommend you look at Films on Demand. It'll blow you away. There is a lot there, and you can use them both online and on ground, and we've paid for them. And there's tons of really good stuff. Films on Demand. So if you just search for Films on Demand, you'll find it. It's also available through the website. If you go to Library, Videos, it'll be listed there, Films on Demand. Okay, so that's DCM or DMCA, which is really a way to lock down something. Now, the TEACH Act was specifically with online in mind. It is a addendum to the Copyright Act of 1976, the Technology, Education, and Copyright Harmonization Act of, I don't know, doesn't say here. I will read my notes. This is important. The TEACH Act amends sections 110 parentheses 2 close parentheses and 112 parentheses F close parentheses of the U.S. Copyright Act. The TEACH Act facilitates and enables the performance and display of copyrighted materials for distance education by accredited nonprofit educational institutions. The institution must be an accredited nonprofit educational institution. So for-profit schools can't do it. They cannot invoke the TEACH Act. Non-accredited institutions can't do it. We are non-profit accredited, so we're okay. The use must be part of mediated instructional activities. That means you got to have a teacher. You can't just throw the students in there and say, go do it. It has to be some mediation. The use must be limited to a specific number of students enrolled in a specific class. So in my class online, I have 20 students in that class. They can do that. But the use must be either for live or asynchronous class sessions. Well, I don't know what else you can do. Live, asynchronous. It's either one or the other, but that's what the law says. The use must not include the transmission of textbook materials. So you cannot have textbook materials attached to something that you are streaming. You can have textbook materials that they purchase on their own, but you can't be transmitting textbook materials unless that is okayed directly by the textbook. Where am I? Okay, or materials typically purchased or acquired by students. So anything that the students might normally buy, you can't just give. It's really what it's trying to stop you, is from giving away something that the students would normally purchase. Only reasonable and limited portions, such as might be performed or displayed during a typical live classroom session, may be used. Reasonable and limited. So you use what you would use in a classroom, but it's got to be limited. You cannot say, okay, go watch this entire movie. You can't do that. It has to be limited. It has to be limited in a reasonable amount.
You can't go and watch the entire movie? What do you mean?
You cannot, by the Teach Act, put up an entire movie online and tell your students to go watch it.
How about if you link something which is on the YouTube?
That's different, and that's YouTube has a licensing that's a separate thing that you're taking care of. But you cannot upload to your website to Angel the entire movie and say go watch that. Unless the entire movie you can't do. It has to be limited. It has to be a reasonable and limited amount.
Even those films on demand?
No, the films on demand we pay for.
Okay, just check.
Yeah.
What about a faculty member that brings a video from home and ties it into a history lesson and brings it in the classroom and shows it?
In the classroom is not Teach Act. In the classroom's fine.
Okay.
Because you own the physical copy.
Correct. But taking that same thing and turning it into a stream and putting it online,
Like if you use the Panopto and you recorded the whole class, which played the whole video and put it online, that's a no.
Correct.
Okay.
Because you're changing the format, and one of the things that is copyrighted is the video transmission. So you have to get a separate license in order to do that legally. But if it were a limited amount and reasonable, you can. But doing the whole thing,
Just do part of it one day, part of it another day.
yes, maybe.
Okay, break it up.
15 minutes a day.
When
And
people
then you're
do
legal.
it on YouTube, part 1, part 2, part 3.
And the thing is about this, you don't have to ask permission.
Oops.
To do this,
That's just crazy too.
I'm talking too much. Because of the Teach Act and because of fair use, if you're sure that you're okay, you don't have to ask anybody's permission. You can just do it. If they have a copyright and you want to use it and you have a good reason and it's here, you just do it. Usually it's better to ask. Doesn't hurt to ask. And the library will clear copyright for you for many things really easily and quickly, and they'll do their best. But you don't have to ask if you're within these parameters. Okay, but the institution must implement some technological measures to ensure compliance with these policies beyond merely assigning a password. Ensuring compliance through technological means may include user and location authentication through IP checking, content timeouts, print disabling, cut and paste disabling, etc. Angel is enough, because it's not only password authentication, but there is connections with our student information system that authenticates that this student is who they say they are, because they get enrolled into that class by DataTel. So we have a double check, and there are limits as well to what we can put on there inside of Angel. So if you're in Angel, you're generally okay. So that is the TEACH Act, and this is right now under review by Congress. And it's always been under review from the time it passed. There are a lot of lawsuits about this right now. Especially the Recording Institute of America, or whatever they're called, the music people are very unhappy about this, and some of the publishers as well. So this is really in flux. So watch, there'll be changes, maybe in the next couple of months. The Supreme Court has a couple of these cases right now, and they're looking at some of them. So very interesting and in flux thing. Okay. Any questions, comments? What's copyright?
The right to copy.
What's fair use?
There's four points to it.
Yes, the four-factor balancing test.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to invoke fair use, and I wrote a book and you want to use my book, can you just use my book without asking me?
In the classroom?
Depends on how I use it.
Depends on how you use it, correct. If I made a movie and you want to use it in the classroom,
Who owns the movie?
doesn't matter. In the classroom, it shouldn't matter at all. Online, it has to be limited. That's when the TEACH Act is different from fair use.
And as long as your classroom is a not-for-profit accredited classroom.
Mm-hmm.
My sister teaches for like national seminars. She does seminars. She has to obtain rights for anything she uses because her company is making money. She's making money.
Right.
But
right.
not-for-profit.
Not-for-profit accredited. Those are two important ones.
She pays right
from the owner.
Okay.
She gets rights for everything that she uses in her classes, but she's a corporate trainer, for national seminars, so and that's a whole nother ball.
Everything has to be, but there are universities and colleges that are for profit, like University of Phoenix, Baker. Some of these schools have different rules. Because we are accredited, not for profit, we have the maximum leeway.
Could I ask a question about the fair use though? Does that apply to the fair use? Does it apply to the students when they're giving a presentation or something? We as a teacher, we're trying to share knowledge with their students, but they're doing a project, a PowerPoint or whatever, and does it apply to them as well?
Great question.
Do you know the answer?
Well, I think so, but I want to see what do you think?
I don't know the answer.
I would say they're enrolled in the college, that they would have the same rights as anybody else that's teaching. That's my opinion though.
Yeah, I don't know. I've never known.
It actually, the law does not apply to faculty. It applies to the institution.
Okay.
So anybody engaged in these activities qualifies. But it's incumbent on the institution to educate them about this. And we're doing a pretty poor job, in my opinion, about, especially with students. showing them what is okay and not okay as an institution. I don't think you can find anything on the website that educates students on what's okay and not okay under fair use.
I find even my students in IT, they don't understand that having, let's say they have to do something in, I don't know, in Excel, and they will just have their friend, like they've got a friend in class, and they'll have their friend do it, and they'll just take the friend's files and change their name on it. They don't, a lot of times I found, I used to think, okay, they're cheating, and I would, you know, really read them the Riot Act. I find a lot of times they'll say, well, we work together. They really don't understand that you can't do that. That is someone else's, and you have to do your own work. And again, but again, I think it's a generational thing, and how this is all, everything is very murky. And it's up to us to educate them that that is not okay. Write it in our syllabi or whatever.
I also think to some extent it's a case of the high schools don't enforce any kind of policy like that either. So they've got years of habits, and they don't, and then you have to try and break them of the habit. And we can go over it. You know, I teach freshman comp, so we're constantly going over it. You know, you have to document this, and they usually do okay with the word for word stuff. But summary, they just don't understand it. When they put in their own words, they still have to give credit.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we go over it and over and over, and I'm constantly, even at this point in the semester, like, guys, we've got to, you know, because they just do not get it, and they've never had to. They've, you know, they've got years of, if I didn't take it word for word, or just years of nobody checked, so they don't, so they've just gotten used to doing it quick and easy, and
but it's up to us. It is up to us
I think some of it is
educate them.
Yeah, but even when you do it, it's going to be a kind of a long battle.
Yes.
Because they're, you know, they've got old habits, and you know, I talked to this thing. I think when you're talking about trying to fix their grammar, is like, guys, even if you intellectually get this, you've got to be paying. You've got to really be paying attention to it. Because it's like any other habit you're trying to break, you have to concentrate on doing it the new way for a while. You're going to fall back into old habits.
Yes.
And when you say it's a generational thing, I can see it because, you know, these kids have grown up with technology the way, at least I didn't, you know, and a number of us didn't. And they're constantly on the phone doing things on the web or anywhere. So they can't separate themselves from their realities, you know.
And I think the boundaries of privacy, because of things like social networking, Facebook and everything, are very blurred. And again, what what is private or what is owned by me, because everyone broadcasts everything.
And not only that, but you're on your Facebook page. There are sections where other people can alter your Facebook page.
Oh yeah.
You know, so maybe my profile, but not everything on there is actually mine. It's actually something I wrote, but I'm allowed to delete it if I don't like it. You know, other people can write on my wall, I can just delete it off if I don't want it there, and even though it's not my words.
Part of this, and because I don't think it's just habit, and I don't think it's just a failure to teach. I think it's an actual cultural thing. And partly I say that because I've lived in other cultures for long periods of time, and their ideas about this are very different from what our ideas here are. And that's why our laws also are very different from the rest of the world. And so it's a cultural change that we're trying to institute through our actions. Also, some of the wording of these things, I think, takes that into consideration. Fair is a relative term.
Exactly.
And what is fair to you and fair to me may be different.
What's working together, what's stealing.
Right, right. What is ownership? What does
limited mean?
Yeah.
You know, what this legal language has so much kind of platitude there that, you know, you don't know.
I know some cultures that there are certain things that you never quote, because if you really know anything about the subject, you should know where I got it from anyway. So I don't ever have to document Shakespeare, because you know, in the English class, because if the professor doesn't know I'm quoting Shakespeare, they shouldn't have the job.
Right. And I really liked what you said about it's a culture, because I was saying generation, and I didn't even like using that word, because it's not just the young people. It is a culture. That's a much better word than what I was using. It's
Especially,
a cultural thing.
you have
People
foreign students in your class that were brought up in other cultures, and their idea, even though they may not be young millennial kids, their ideas of working together are very different.
Yes.
And a very good point about Shakespeare. I did 20 years in Asia, and in Asia, for millennia, they worked on Confucian. Confucius says this, that, and other things, and they memorized it. They don't ever say from Confucius. It was just, of course, understood. And their idea of working together is, I'm representing this group as your boss, therefore everything that you do is mine. And none of it is yours because I'm the boss. And
freelance writing to some extent works that way, because if you, like one of the big lawsuits that's still been going on, like comic books, normally anything that you do for a comic book company, they automatically own it. They own all the characters and all that stuff. And actually, there's still lawsuits going on over who owns the copyright to Superman, with some of the families, and one of the companies in the late 80s, early 90s, Image Comics was formed because several of the creators were tired of, you know, I do all this work for Marvel or for DC, and then they get the copyright. So they actually formed Image Comics with the idea that the creators would hang on to the copyrights, and eventually Marvel ended up buying them back out because they couldn't make it. But you know, and when I do freelance for the paper, I have to ask, you know, I almost have to ask permission to use any of my own work, because even though I wrote it, they own the copyright, because when I sell them the story, effectively they get the copyright.
Right.
So, granted, I read the website for them, but I actually had to ask permission to post one of my own articles on the website that I'm doing for them, because of the way the copyright laws work.
And did you allow yourself to use it? Because if you said no, that would be really bad.
No, because I don't have the copyright. I had to ask them.
You had to ask them.
I didn't have the copyright. Even though I wrote it, I didn't have the
I just
copyright.
want to say, this is a segue, and I'm sorry, but when you said about grammar, teaching grammar, I'm not in the English department,
Yeah.
well, I have an undergrad in English, so it's very important to me, but even with my IT students, trying to get them not make typos and stuff like that, one of my students told me yesterday, when I had marked him down because he hadn't capitalized anything, and he said, well, in Syria, we don't capitalize anything. And I said, are we in Syria? You know, I mean, I'm not teaching in Syria. If I was in Syria, I wouldn't be grading you down. But we're in the U.S., and this is, I expect you to capitalize things. But his response was, in Syria, he didn't have to.
Right, and a lot of the punctuation problems we have with English is because most other languages don't have interior punctuation. A comma's not necessary.
Right.
Because they have other grammatical structures that will tell you what goes with what.
But I'm telling you, it's not an issue with foreign students, you know. Yesterday, I returned the midterms, and we had this kind of conversation of misuse of the language, you know, big time. But, you know, it's the American students that don't know
No, they don't know
basic stuff.
You're right. Okay.
But
Sorry.
the point is that all of these things, and one of the reasons why this is always in flux, one of the reasons why there are lawsuits about it, is that it's a cultural thing. And we're part of a culture that is changing, that has members of different circumstances, and this will continue to change. Now, an important part of this is you are working with students in an educational institution that has some special laws that apply to you. Those also continue to change. Keep your ears open to some of the changes. Try to instill in your students the importance of following the law, but understand that the laws are never going to stay the same. Things will always be in flux. And that's one of the cool things about it. If people can keep the emotions away from it, because some people get very angry about things, but it's, to me, it's very interesting to watch the evolution of this. And we can actually influence the evolution of it as educators. Okay, anything else before we move on to the next activity, which I think is like my last slide, or just about.
I do have a question.
Yes.
I think we've talked about it. In arts and sciences, our staff, faculty give us issues to copy. It could be tests, it could be anything. Sometimes it's textbooks, pages out of a textbook. And some of the staff are very uncomfortable copying for the faculty, and yet part of their responsibility is to do what the faculty asks them to do. So we have some people interpreting it one way, and then other staff say, no, 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 I don't think it should be interpreted that way. I think I can do it. Very gray, and it's making the staff very uncomfortable because they don't know what to tell faculty.
Can I weigh in on that?
Yes, please.
I think one of the big differences is whether or not the textbook's being used in the class.
It's not.
And that's where, because for my final, I routinely have every time I get a new textbook, I have to get something copied for the final because I have them do essays. I routinely have them do essays out of the book, or where they read one of the essays out of the book and they have to write their own essay on it, answering some interpretive question or explain something about the structure or something. And during the semester, I usually just let them do open book, but for the final, I want it closed because there's an objective part to it as well. So I always have them run basically a copy. And I would think that if it's, Bill and I kind of had this discussion before, if they're using the textbook, somebody, and especially if you're collecting it afterwards, you're pretty well on solid ground because somebody's already paid for the copyright for the use, and you're not, by collecting the extra copies you're making, nothing else is changing.
Right, but by copying the book,
but when you're getting out of a different book, that's different, and I know
the students haven't paid for it.
I know
It's
that.
not the entire book. It's
Right.
pages out of the book.
But that could impinge upon the owner, the copyright owner, their
There's
profit.
some documentation saying that depending on how many pages are in the book, if you duplicate a small amount, a reasonable and limited amount, you're okay. And if you do it one time, but we can't monitor how many times faculty continue to copy it term after term. That's our issue.
Question. Really good issue, and comes up all the time. Who's the cop? Who's responsible?
Who's going to monitor?
Not the person that's copying wouldn't be in trouble. I would think it would be the instructor that would be using it.
Correct.
That's what I would think.
But how can we monitor that? We can't.
No, but I'm just saying the person, I understand the person doesn't want to copy it, but they're not going to get in trouble.
Not up to you. Your responsibility is not there. It's their responsibility to know what they're doing is within the 4-factor test of fair use.
And if you don't like the instructor, you can tell them. No,
Right.
I'm just kidding.
And it's really up to
sorry.
them
I'm sorry.
to determine that. Because
And
they're
they
the-
don't.
And they don't.
Right.
Because they've not been educated.
Probably not.
And the institution really needs to do a much better job at making this well known. One of the reasons why I'm doing this today is to try to help with this. But there needs to be, and in fact, if you look at the law and some of them we talked about here, in order for us to be in compliance with the Teach Act, the Teach Act specifically says that the institution has to make efforts to educate faculty, staff, and students. And it is very explicit that we have to, as an institution, educate the faculty, the staff, and the students in this topic so that they will know what is right and what is wrong. And part of what we're doing here today is part of that, although the school never asked us to do this. We just did it because we think that it's something that needs to be done. But the school needs to publish things. There needs to be things on their website. They need to have, as an institution, an educational effort, not only for faculty, but staff and students. They really need to do this.
So I can tell staff it's okay?
No, if they ask you, the staff, you can tell staff that it's up to the faculty member to determine what is fair use.
Well, they wouldn't give it to them unless they wanted the copies.
Correct. Then it's up to the faculty member, as the person ordering the copy and the person distributing the copy, to comply with copyright law.
The faculty member is the one that's responsible,
Right.
not the person
It's
copying
not
or
the person
you.
copying. I have been used as a staff person where people have come to me and said, please take this movie, convert it to online and put it up on YouTube for me so that I can give this to my students. Because I know what I know and because of who I am, I can say, well, yeah, but here. But in the case of my staff here, they will say yes, and they will do what they are told, because that's their responsibility.
Exactly.
But I'm a little different, and in some cases you might ask the faculty member, I mean, are you sure that you're complying with the Teach Act? And
they're gonna say, what is that?
what is that?
Yeah, exactly.
And then
But you
they
know,
really need to go talk to the CTL and find out.
You may cause faculty to be educated, because, you know, I'm being educated
Yes.
big
Yeah.
time today, you know,
It's
there are a lot of
wonderful.
things that I didn't know about.
Right.
And again, I think people, a lot of times,
Copies with their copies back to them.
You know, but
Here's
if
my
you read
copyright laws,
this,
make sure.
if you read the Fair Use Policy Act, it's very foggy.
oh, yeah.
You don't, even after reading it, they're gonna say, yeah,
Yeah.
so here, take it. It doesn't address it, really.
It doesn't.
It's not
And
clear at all.
It's not clear.
But it's just for lawyers, so they can make their case either way. You know, it's just-
And you know what I also found is if we copy one page out of the textbook, send it to the copy center to duplicate enough for every student, 30 copies, the copy center said, I won't do it. I know it's from a textbook. I refuse to do it. So we have issues there too. And the copy center's okay to say that because that's what they've been told. That's the law. So, you know, we have conflicts. Copy center says, I'm not gonna do it. So it comes back to the staff and the staff says, okay, I guess I have to do it. You know, so it's just not clear.
It's not clear, and
it's making them very uncomfortable.
and I really feel for you. I've been in your position, so I understand. Yes, sir.
Unfortunately, this is one of those things that Barter should have maybe, but I think this is one of those places where the concept of criminal intent has been lost and really needs to be found again. I think that's one of those concepts in general that needs to be found, because the rule always used to be that if a reasonable person didn't think they were breaking the law, it didn't matter what the law was. You weren't, you know, the worst thing that would happen is they'd drag you and say, by the way, you can't do this anymore, stop, and that was it. Now it doesn't work that way. We seem to have lost that concept in large areas of the law, and this might be one of those places where we need to kind of push for finding it again. That if a reasonable person doesn't think they're, that's one of the things the RIAA, for one, would be dramatically fighting against, I'm sure.
Many years ago, so to speak, relatively, before the age of the internet, the big problem area or area of concern was the copy center and Kinko's and other offices like that used to surround campuses. You don't see them here anymore, but they used to be there, and faculty used to put together course packs.
Yeah, I used to do, when I was teaching at Wayne, you know, I had course packs all the time.
Right, but you didn't pay anybody for them, and it was illegal. And there were many lawsuits.
I
and
didn't even know that was illegal. You see,
Right.
that's the thing.
That exactly the same case
Even
now.
if the student buys it from the bookstore, a course pack?
Now, okay, because they've worked out how to pay the publisher originally
Okay.
for that,
Mhm.
and they're putting together a real course pack under the right rules. But originally, a faculty member would come in and say, I want chapter 1 of this, chapter 5 of this, chapter
Yeah.
7 of that, and make that up and make 50 copies of them, and
Right.
Yeah, that'd be you just get this huge packet.
Right.
Anything that's sold through the bookstore, that means they filled out a form and somebody in the school went through and got the permissions.
Yeah.
It's but you get a lot of stuff that, yeah, you wouldn't, I can remember sometimes, sometimes you get that, and sometimes the instructor would come in the first day with a stack of papers this high to distribute to people, and there's a lot of reading and things in there, extra material that we couldn't fit in the textbook, and some of it looks like there's whole books.
Again, the 4-factor test is a really good thing to keep in mind. Those 4 things are, how much is it? How much of the thing is it? What is the nature of the work? What is the, how'd it go? Actually had it.
Not for profit, the
Not for
nature,
profit.
amount, and
and
sustainability.
wouldn't stop the owner of the copyright from getting a profit.
Yeah.
Or any income. So if you're going to duplicate an entire chapter of a book, first of all, it's an entire chapter, so it's not a reasonable, limited amount.
Well, what if there's 100 chapters in the book?
Well,
Then
then
it
it
might
could
be
be.
reasonable.
Right, except that, and that's
It's
where.
an entire,
Yeah, it's an entire.
But you said
a
even
part.
if it's 1 page, could
And-
run
and
into.
It all depends on the definition of reasonable
Right.
and limited.
Right.
And that's why it's up to the faculty member to decide, because the faculty member is the expert in that field. They're the ones who are asking for it to be done, and they have to make that determination. If they are unsure, they should go to the library, because they have people here who will make that determination, or they will ask for copyright clearance, and they will contact the publisher and say, can I copy 100 copies of page 3 for use in this class?
is there a particular person we go to in the library, or like a department or something like that, do you know?
Yes, I do,
Okay.
and that's on the last page of the thing, but
okay.
it doesn't matter, because in the spring he'll be gone.
Oh, okay. Bruce?
Bruce.
Okay.
All
All right, is he retired?
Yeah.
Oh,
But you said that, if for instance, there is I'm teaching from a certain mythology book, but there is another mythology book that has a very nice family tree about the Greek gods.
Right.
Now, to have a copy of that, would it be fair use or would be illegal?
It depends. And
Depends on?
Lots of different things. On the 4-factor test. That's when you should go think about the 4-factor test when you're looking at one piece, one document. First of all, for instance, with that 4-factor test, are you stopping that publisher from making money? Probably. You could probably say, I would like to make a copy of this one document, one image, for all of my students, and can I pay you 50 cents each, or something like that. Ask them for permission. If you think that it is going to stop them from making money, and it probably would stop them from making money. But I don't know. It
Even if it's out of
The
print.
first, in that particular scenario, I would think,
could matter, but if not, it could matter.
in that particular scenario, I would think what I would do is I would just, because I've got something similar with me, when we do, fragments and run-ons, I've got these lists of clause markers, and everybody's got their own list of what they think the most common ones are, so I just basically made my own. And said, well, these are the ones that I think are the most common. And this includes everything that everybody's got on them and a few others, and and it's the same as if you make your own tree, and this is all common knowledge, so if you went out and just made your own tree of the ones that you think they're gonna need to know, it's a lot of extra work, but at that point,
Yeah, I
you're-
mean, that's
Then you
the
don't
thing.
have to worry about
then you're not,
Right,
it's not
but
copyrighted
the point
because
is
generally-
that, so far, I had directed them there because, you know, I thought,
Yeah.
why do I have to spend? I mean, I'm not such a great technologically
Right.
speaking, you know, so, you know, just making those kind of designs, I'm not good at it, and it would take me a whole day to, I mean, or several hours to do it, and, you know, but if I'm breaking the law, I would do that, but I thought, I wasn't, so I don't know.
Look at the four-factor test, why you wanna use it, what is the nature of that work? Are you stopping them from making any money? And what are you using it for in the classroom? You may not be breaking the law, you may be breaking the law, think about it,
Yeah.
and you make that determination.
Well, I can't make it myself, you know, because I don't think that,
Then,
I
as the
stop.
librarian.
Yeah, I'll ask, but, you know, I don't think that I'm stopping them from making money, because under any circumstances, no circumstances, I would ask my students to buy the whole book just because they
Right.
wanted to
It's
look at
just
that.
one
Little,
piece, yeah.
you know, thing.
Well,
I think
well,
you're fine.
this conversation is really, really good, because that's actually
Yeah.
what I wanted to have happen. I wanted you guys to start thinking about what's going on in my life here, what am I doing here, and how does this actually affect what I really do? These scenarios that I brought up here are ones that I just kind of brought up in my own head.
Mhm.
What I really wanted you to do is what you're doing now. What in your professional career at Macomb issues are you having with copyright, with fair use? How are you going to resolve those issues? What are there other ones that you're having? Now this one I talk about, yeah, the VHH test, the carts no longer have VHS.
Depends on the cart.
What are you gonna do? Well, it depends on the cart, right?
Right.
Well, what do you do? And what do you do here, but it's an online class, what do you do? You're making a PowerPoint, you need some pictures, you wanna just, you know, copy this, paste it in there, what do you do? What are some other things that you're having? These are some possible scenarios. The one from the one-page book, the chart, really good example. Making copies for faculty, really good example.
I mean,
Going
that's
to
something
the one
that
I
is
brought
really
up,
good.
if it's out of print and then nobody's making money out of it, and if you copy something that you've got in your personal library, you know, and I do that for the class in the theory of the commons, but you can't buy it, so that probably shouldn't be covered by.
What if the library had it? And you copied it out of the library version, technically the school owns it, right?
That's a good question.
Just my opinion.
Well, no, they have one copy of it
One
in the
copy.
library. When you make a copy, you are changing the media, and by doing so, you've made a new copy, and you've done something to that. Yes, sir?
I was gonna say, you're also theoretically changing the market, because you're increasing the availability of it. It's not one person, they've gotta take turns using it, it's now there's 30 of them, or 50 of them.
But that's what the faculty are doing as
Yeah.
staff.
Mm-hmm.
Right, but if it's out of
Mhm.
print, I mean, out of print, there's no market.
If it's out of print, probably it's out of copyright as well. It's
Right.
probably beyond copyright. There-
Because you
If
have
it's
to
out
renew
of
it every
print,
so often. You have to renew it every so often, that's one of the excuses that a lot of going back to the comic book companies, they have, in order to maintain the copyright on character, they have to use it every so many, I think every 5 years they have to use it at least once or
it's
so
the
many
Mickey
years.
Mouse law. That's-
So what they have to, so that's
Disney's-
why you get things like the Avengers would traditionally, every certain anniversary, they would find a way to use every Avenger that had ever been, they put them in a flashback, or they reuse them, just because it was a way to help maintain the copyright on all the characters.
There's a part of the law includes a term, something to the effect of the lifetime of the author of the work, or whatever that is, the creator, the copyright holder, plus, I think 57 or something like that. There's some weird number after that. Their life plus a certain number of years. But descendants, corporations, other people that have an interest in continuing, like Mickey Mouse. Mickey Mouse is the one that everybody quotes, and the one that's very that started the trend of, okay, every certain number of years they'll put it out there on TV, or they'll put it out there in the theaters, in order to renew their copyright, to show that it's actually a viable thing that they can continue.
That's why Disney, when they put something in the vault and they don't want to sell, say, the Jungle Book for a couple years, they have to bring it out every once in a while because otherwise they would lose the copyright.
Oh,
Right.
You know, they want to increase the sales for when it's out there, but they have to bring it out every so many years and use it, or do a sequel or something
Okay.
with those characters. They would lose the copyright on the original.
And-
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, when you can, if there's time, could you mention about, you mentioned a little bit about YouTube, but I'd like to know a little bit more about YouTube and the fair use of that in a classroom.
Okay, real close, YouTube, real quick. YouTube has a standard license that when you put something up on YouTube, there's a little checkbox that you have to check what license you're applying. You cannot make it a closed license. It's a Creative Commons license of some kind.
Okay.
And normally it's what they call the standard YouTube license, which is open and everybody can do that and without changing. And it's actually called the standard YouTube license. It's a form of the Creative Commons license, and you can put things up there, or you can use things that are on YouTube freely in a classroom without even worrying
Now,
about it.
if there is something on YouTube, I don't know legally or illegally they put it up there, but on my web-enhanced Angel
Right.
site,
Right.
could I put the link in?
Yes.
Okay.
However, YouTube is, as a company, is responsible for policing their copyright. That was the other
Mhm.
part of this.
Yes.
If the copyright holder objects, or if somebody takes something and puts something up that somebody else has the copyright to, and they say, wait a minute, you can't do that, you can't use our stuff with that kind of license, then YouTube will
Is
take it off.
responsible.
Right.
And they will take it off. The second somebody complains, it's gone.
But as long as it is on YouTube.
You can have a reasonable assurance that it is copyright free, and you can use it.
The other
If
thing,
it's on
again,
YouTube.
going back, links usually tend to be much safer because you're not actually copyrighting, you're just basically pointing a direction. And whoever owns the copyright, if it's on that site, they're still getting paid because they're getting traffic, it helps with their ad rates.
Yes.
They're benefiting from you directing them
they're
traffic.
making
So
it
most
available.
places, and most other than some sort of little notice that says we're not affiliated, most places will let you put up any kind of a link. You play around at the bottom to get some idea, and they'll usually mention what the rules are that they want you to follow. But usually it's not much more than a non-affiliation link because by sending them traffic, you're increasing their business.
Or an attribution link where
Yeah.
you need to say that I got this from this place.
So that would be told to us once we clicked on the link and we looked at everything, it would say
Right.
how we
If
should
it
use
wasn't
that.
completely open, there will be a notice of copyright.
Okay.
But in YouTube, there are actually 3 levels of security. If you upload anything to YouTube, you can choose one of 3 types of security. One is what most people think of, because that's what they see, is open. Anybody can look at it, anybody can search for it, anybody can find it, anybody can play it. The second is called unlisted, and that is actually there, but you can't get to it unless you know the address. If you have the link, then you can do it, but you can't get the link unless you have the link, so it's unlisted. The third is called private, and that has a password attached to it, so you need the password in order to open it up. If somebody puts something up on YouTube and they don't want it to be viewed by anybody, they would either use the unlisted one, or if they really didn't want to use, wanted to really lock it down, they would use the private
And
one.
those would be the unlisted and the private would be the only ones we really need to worry about on YouTube as far as
And-
copyright.
Actually, yes, but you wouldn't even have to worry about those because you're not going to see those at all. Anything that you see on YouTube is available, is visible and open.
Okay.
The other 2 are hidden, so you won't see them.
Right, but if I guess I mean if I had a password to a private one, or I was able to find one, and
Right.
like my son has done stuff and he's put it under unlisted,
I shouldn't necessarily, that would be, he doesn't want it shown to everybody.
Right.
And that would be wrong to show it to everybody, I guess that's what I meant.
It would be wrong because it wasn't the intent of the person putting
Yes.
it up there. And
Okay.
if that person finds that their copyright has been infringed upon, they can go in and shut it down.
Yes.
Or they can tell YouTube, and YouTube will shut it down.
That was good. Good.
Anything else? Anything outstanding? Anything that you want to discuss? Real quick before I do that, wanted to mention I gave you copies of all of these, except the last one, which is Bruce Bet, which is actually a link to betb@macomb.edu. He's normally he actually developed this with me. Normally he would sit here with me and do this workshop, but he's working today. He's also retiring this spring. So, but anybody, any of the librarians will help you with copyright. They will help you to clear copyright. They have connections with what is called the Copyright Clearance Center. They actually will pay for some things depending on what it is. If you have something that you really want to use in your classes, you want to use somewhere, and it is copyrighted, talk to them. They will try to clear the copyright for you. If it is not clearable, or if it is too expensive or something, they will also try to determine whether or not it can be done with fair use. So work with them. They're really, really good, and they're very willing to help, very knowledgeable on the subject. And Bruce helped write the present policy that's not yet promulgated on fair use. So they really help.
Sorry, zone out there for a second. Where is this?
The library.
Just the library.
Yeah, ask the librarians. Any of the librarians will help. Bruce is the most conversant in the subject, Bruce Bet, but he's retiring in the spring, going off on his sailboat.
So are you going to email us this PowerPoint so we can have all of these links?
Probably yes, but you already have the links in the documentation that I sent you.
It's that fact
Right
that
here.
right hand there.
Right, there's.
All of these
Right,
are
what I'm
right.
saying is, but I have to type it, you know, when
Yeah.
we hear
Yeah. We will have this available. It's actually on the web someplace already. but,
Okay.
Yeah. It'll go in Angel too. Okay, so those are Macomb resources, and there are a couple of other resources that I didn't actually include in any of these, although I got extra ones in here. But these are some other resources. The ALA is a good place to go. The American Library Association, they're really good. They keep things up to date. Stanford University is really, really good. They've got an excellent site. Know Your Copyrights, I actually have, that's where I think this one came from. Copyright Fair Use, Teaching and Learning Innovation in the Web 2.0 World. And I don't even know where that is from, I can't remember. Let's see here.
Now, let me ask you a question, you know, just since you said that. Now, you printed this out from their site, right? Is this
Yes.
fair use?
Creative Commons license.
So, provided that it's down here,
Mhm.
it's, okay, great.
It's also
I was not trying to imply that you
No.
didn't, but you know.
He probably knows what,
But it's-
but in government, a lot of the government, like if you go to government websites, they will say Creative Commons license, free to distribute.
Okay.
That it'll be right there. It's, you just kind of have to start looking for it. I was gonna say, what I tell my students again, and many of us are educators, but even if we're not educators, think about if you are debating with yourself, is it fair to use, or if it, you know, should I cite the person? Think about if you had written it,
Right.
if you had created it,
Put the
and
shoe on the other foot.
someone else was using it without giving you credit, or with whatever, and if it, I'm not saying that's the gold
But, you
standard,
know,
but
that's-
that's what,
that's good.
you write things or whatever, it's, things are on the web, they get on the web, whether or not you, especially being a teacher, you've distributed, somebody has copied it. would it be fair if another instructor, hey, this is pretty good, what you wrote?
Yeah,
and just-
provided they give credit, I mean, that's.
Okay, so you would want credit, okay, there you
That's
go.
with attribution.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really good definition of what is fair.
Yeah, that,
To me, what is fair is what I would feel if it were done to me.
yes.
And if I'm all right with it, well, then you should probably be all right if I do it to you. But I shouldn't be doing something to you that I'm not okay to having
The
something to
golden
do to
rule.
me.
There's the
That's
golden
right,
rule.
golden
Do unto
rule.
others as you
What
would.
is fair on both sides. Put the shoe on the other foot and kind of look at it through their eyes. Excellent, excellent
Yeah.
way to put this in a real personal context.
How about Wikipedia?
Good question. What about Wikipedia, guys? What is Wikipedia?
If a lot of people contribute to that.
Yeah.
Actually, Wikipedia, Creative Commons license. It's right there. Many people contribute to it, but it's all under the Creative Commons license. As long as you're attributing it to the correct source, fine. I'm going to stop the recording.